Thank you so much, Aaron. Open it up for questions if anybody has any questions.
I guess I would ask that there's all these behavioral health factors that are really protective in other areas of epidemiology. We look at protective factors for all these things like the gatherings and all this, and also environmental, like a sandy floor is actually really great for. So there's all these things that actually were negative, disease related on your, and then how do you balance? Are you balancing it for like the protection of that, like positive social gatherings and the good things of human health, and yet were you adjusting for that or?
Not in that particular model, I wasn't, but yeah, I mean it's a really good point, and the fact is that the health of wetlands have often been criticized as harboring a lot of disease, but the fact is that you need to be able to. It's about balancing the various health outcomes from restorative activities, conservation activities, and I think maintaining that flow and maintaining the connectivity between systems is really important for being able to predict whether or not there's a lot of disease, and whether there's what the condition of biodiversity and is within that system.
Sorry, would you mind introducing yourself, and if everyone could do that before they ask a question, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm Amy Thornton, and I'm an MPH in Sustainable Health and Global Environment at the Chan School.
Thank you.
Concentration. And interested in behavioral health, as not just the psychological behavioral health factors, but all the pieces like diet and movement, which a lot of those middle ones, which create higher incidence of typhoid, are actually, in my world, can help us live longer and happier lives. So
yeah, I mean it's nested systems, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you made an incredible chart. That was amazing. Yeah. And then the composting toilet too is another thing which I'm studying, which is an amazing tool to have, or we should be using a lot more of them. And so then a layperson might look at that and go, oh, get rid of all the trains that are open, and like, no, don't go there.
Well, the interesting thing is that the cultural acceptance of composting toilets is difficult, and so we've tried to introduce composting toilets, but the idea of being able to flush a toilet and watch it go away, or to not deal with it, is much more appealing than a composting toilet, and so there's a kind of cultural resistance, if you like, to adoption of composting toilets. Another thing that I didn't really touch on, which I could have, is the fact that there's a lot of totemism around particular types of fish. If you look right across the region, many traditional cultures have placed heavy importance on the types of animals that connect systems. So eels, for example, like crayfish, things that connect across multiple habitats. And so also the taboos associated with those, such as not eating those things that are important to your system, are important conservation mechanisms also. So the taboos associated with these kind of totemic animals are actually preservative for the system.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to follow up really quick. What fish in particular would be considered taboo, say in Fiji or?
Well, so
you mind introducing yourself as well?
Anthony Madrano. I'm a Hughes Fellow at the. I'm here. Yeah, Center for the Environment.
So, for example, different groups have different totems, and so in particular watersheds, for example, or provinces, there are people that can't eat eels, for example. So they're not. That's their totem. That's their particular totem. So they won't be able to eat those. And so in Papua New Guinea, there's a lot of things associated with males that are coming of age not being able to eat red fish. So you don't eat red fish because that signifies menstrual blood, and that's an association with being close to your mother. and so you want to break the ties, and you're breaking the ties to your mother by not eating red fish.
Hey, I'm Rich Fay. I'm with Amy. Just a layman's question, then I've got probably a more serious question. But I've always wondered, and since you're Fiji water, is that really? Do they actually take the water from Fiji? And is there a source for that?
Yes.
And then they ship it all the way over here?
Yes, they do.
I always just wondered if it was a commercial gimmick, or it just seems preposterous to me. But it's
No, it's not.
true.
It's not. It's not a commercial gimmick. There is a groundwater source that they tap into, and there's a big Fiji water factory there that generates something like $100 million a year for Fiji and the company, more so. And one of the major criticisms has been the enormous carbon footprint that company leaves, despite the fact that they're touting their environmental credentials. They have enormous footprint by the amount of water that they ship around the world from Fiji.
The other question is, I talked to a Korean veteran, and I've been going back and forth to Korea for 30 years, and talked to him last year, and he said the one thing I remember about landing into the port of Busan, Korea during the war is the smell of shit all throughout the province, because they use that as a fertilizer, and there wasn't any public toilets or anything like that. They just collected it and then put it around the grass. So all throughout Korea, it just smelled of human excrement. And if you were to ask somebody now, okay, you've got a problem, you've got a cultural problem of people spreading excrement to fertilize their field, and the solution would be, the modern day solution would simply be to give somebody a typhoid shot, and you take care of any typhoid problems you have through that cultural thing. And I think, with all of a lot of what you're suggesting is, here are procedural things that we could do to actually get rid of typhoid. I mean, that's one of them. But you can't convince anybody of that. Is there one touchstone point that you could make, that kind of the $1 million card you could set down and say, this is why the typhoid shot's not going to work, and this is why we need to do something different, or we need to change the way that we attack that?
Well, I guess the point is that it's not that the typhoid shot won't work, it's that it only works for one thing. And that doesn't, it's like a band-aid, reactive, very narrow approach to solving a problem, but it's only that problem. So there's all the rest of the various kinds of ailments that come from shit being around everywhere. And there's a whole variety of different ailments that come from not having good drainage, in order to get rid of the shit. And, there's all of those system level things that can be worked on. So if you think about the problem in terms of, well, this is something it's nested within the system of a catchment, for example, then if you start to tweak things at those higher levels, such as reforesting the edge of the edge of the river, then you can not only reduce the amount of typhoid, but you can also improve biodiversity. You can also reduce a whole variety of other different types of waterborne illnesses. You can improve people's the quality of the water for swimming and everything that lives in it, and probably people's psychosocial health as well, because they're not seeing as degraded water all the time. So it's not that the vaccination won't work. Vaccination probably will work, but it's a very reductive. It's a very reductive way to look at the world, and these things are symptomatic of systems that are off kilter, and so you can make a much bigger difference by doing a single or a couple of things upstream, thinking more medium to long term, and have an effect on much wider range of sustainability issues and public health issues. that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, Alex Moore. I'm a faculty at the Climate Change Institute and postdoc here at the Science of UNCAP. I work on climate change and history. Sponsored a couple of initiatives analogous to the type of work that you're describing here in Bolivia, and the water sanitation, toilet training, et cetera, et cetera. And it struck me that even in very remote areas, the largest, most insurmountable obstacle was government and official stakeholders. So could you tell us more about whom do you deal with, and what are the major policy obstacles or political obstacles or bribes necessary, which are ubiquitous, and how, as a field, we can start to address that and make it so that it is in these people's interests to actually implement what science has proven to be the solution.
Yeah, it's a really important point, and the point is that that the solutions to problems that are traditionally in the domain of health often lie outside of the domain of health. So they're embedded in the decisions and the attitudes of things in forestry and in tourism and other domains. So I guess the way that I have been trying to do this, I came from a wetlands conservation NGO. I ran a wetlands conservation NGO for many years, and we were doing a lot of this work with fish and so forth. And then I started to work on typhoid, and I came into the public health sphere and was working within the the CDC, the Fiji CDC, if you like, and it was kind of a hard slog to try and convince people that these diseases many of these diseases have environmental determinants, and that we should think about ecology and river systems and so forth, and it still is. But I think just getting a voice at the table in the domains that you don't ordinarily see ecologists is really important. So if I had to spend a lot of time trying to gain the trust of the public health field, that the results that we were showing and the work that we were doing was going to have somehow impact and help them deal with their problems. So I guess just trying to kind of keep that dialogue open and to put yourself into positions that it might be really uncomfortable and that you're going to get shot down numerous times, but keep trying not to take it too personally, because people they're very conservative about their domains of knowledge and what their domains of influence, and so I go back to this idea of empathy and compassion and trying to show that, and to be, in order to have the understanding of where someone else is sitting on this, because it's only then that you can get this kind of dialogue happening that's needed to get that cross-sectoral cooperation that's needed. Now, as far as bribing and and that goes, I don't know. I mean, it certainly helps to develop relationships with people in a variety of different sectors, and then a lot more deals happen around the carver bowl than in the meeting rooms. So, I mean, that's, I guess, another thing. Yeah. I didn't really answer your question, but yeah.
No, one of the things that as a field we're trying to do is try to figure out what authority things outside of science that are related to science or motivated by science or inspired by science, whether it's video or public relations or, I don't know, any derivative, what motivates people to act that beyond reading a paper or listening to a presentation or getting money in their pocket.
Well, yeah, I guess one thing is that there are I know that for Pacific Islander government officials that they might get called to a meeting overseas and they get the ride to go overseas and see someplace new and go to a conference and get per diem and all that sort of stuff, which is all nice and stuff. But in order to do that, you have to report on your own particular what you've accomplished in your sector. So particularly with the SDGs. So now every government that's signed on to the Sustainable Development Goals, they have some kind of voluntary reporting for that process, and each of the sectors will have some reporting against that, and that will then facilitate you to be able to go to the meetings, to be able to participate, and there's a bit of an incentive there, I guess, to be traveling and going to meetings and things like that. So what I tried to do with Typhoid was say, in coming up with the plan for typhoid control in Fiji, for example, we invited people from forestry and we invited people from all the different sectors that have anything to do with typhoid, from the perspective of the research that we did. And then we said, look, this impacts on your reporting for your Sustainable Development Goals in your own sector, and this is how. And so how are you going to contribute as a sector to this plan for typhoid control? So I think we probably have the first typhoid plan that's got forestry involved and says that as part of the typhoid control plan for Fiji, we're going to enforce the river buffer zone law, which says that you're not allowed to forest, you're not allowed to cut down trees within 25 meters of the edge of the river, and so it's a policy. But I don't know what country would have that kind of the logging code in their typhoid control strategy, and so that's pretty unique, I think, and it came with the fact that you could say, well, this is what we're doing for sustainability, and the guys from the forestry department can report on the fact that they're contributing to health. So it helps them to be able to report on what they're doing, I guess.
Yeah, Christian.
My name's Christian. I'm a senior at college studying environmental science and public policy. And so I kind of wanted to push more on the same topic. And just sort of in a big picture sort of way, I'm just curious, with all the research that you do that sort of comes from a conservation standpoint or background, but coming into connecting that very meaningfully and very importantly to human health, what would your recommendations be to sort of care for or create systems that care for the health and well-being of the people that you are working with? I mean, I imagine that you wouldn't give the solution of just, we just need to develop it all. We just need to sort of, once they, have Western standards of living and there's just, roads, paved roads and electricity there, and then everything will be perfectly fine and we can sort of just deal with the ecology and the conservation later. I imagine that that's not going to be your approach per se. So I'm wondering sort of what in the midst of all these trade-offs, because there are sort of trade-offs between ecological well-being, human health well-being, development versus, again, conservation, or even social practices versus human health. We sort of cited sort of a risk factor. It can be these social events, yet surely there's a different value in them. And so I wonder if, you're very steeped in all of these trade-offs. And so even though your job isn't to necessarily make, okay, and then here's the solution to it, what do you see as the path forward in the middle of sort of all of these really complicated trade-offs that you're trying to quantify through your scientific
Mm-hmm. I guess, yeah, it's a really important question, and I think I guess the solution, or the not solution, but the pathway forward in trying to convince people is not necessarily to say you have to trade this off for that, but this is where the co-benefits lie, right? So instead of saying you have to give this up in order for this to happen, you say, well, this is where taking this course of action can have multiple benefits. So you're looking for the synergies rather than where you have to make sacrifices. So emphasizing the synergies rather than the sacrifices, and saying, this is cost saving. So combining in health impact assessment, combining ecological economics with health economics, you can start to make these arguments where you don't necessarily have to make the trade-offs. That you're not seeing the system as costly, but as it's beneficial to both. So I guess that's kind of where I would come from, is that you emphasize where the synergies are and not where the trade-offs need to be made. Yeah.
All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, we'll wrap up, but I think Aaron will stay for a few minutes in case anyone wants to chat with him.
Yeah, happy.
Thank you, Aaron.